can be stranger than fiction. In the case of this Netflix original series, it can also be more disturbing. Welcome to WatchMojo, and today we're counting down our picks for the top 10 shocking things from Mindhunter that actually happened. For this list, we're looking behind the scenes at some of the unbelievable true stories that Mindhunter is based on. Please note, this video will contain major spoilers. If you're not fully caught up on Mindhunter yet, save this for later and start binge watching.
And he says a demon inhabiting a neighbor's dog made him do it.
Do we really buy that?
Number 10. Ed Kemper turned himself in.
So how can I help?
Okay. I'm an instructor working out of the behavioral science unit at Quantico, and I had this idea.
Have you had breakfast? Can I get you something? You want a sandwich?
Not only is Mindhunter an incredibly well-produced series, it also avoids gratuitous violence, instead focusing on the psychology of the criminals, letting them tell their own stories, or at least the actors playing them. Edmund Kemper is an open book, gladly talking about his crimes in grisly detail.
At the same time, I was living a vile, depraved, entirely parallel other life, filled with debased violence and mayhem and fear and death.
Wow. Certainly seems to me like you had your own unusual
MO.
But he's also, interestingly enough, happy to dissect his own motivations and thought patterns. In Mindhunter, we learn that Kemper actually turned himself into police.
When nobody came, he got sick of waiting, decided to turn himself in. Called from a payphone, confessed.
This was also the case for the real Kemper. The reason? There was no talk of his crimes on the news, and apparently that made his fleeing justice feel pointless. So he called the police to confess. Number 9. Wayne Williams press conference.
So you were out working this late at night?
But I had to go pick up a check. I'm a photographer.
I thought you said you were in the music business.
I'm a Renaissance man.
They say there's no such thing as bad press, and that seems to be a philosophy that Atlanta native Wayne Williams subscribed to. After being brought in for questioning relating to the Atlanta killings, at which point he also volunteered to take a polygraph test, Williams called a press conference to proclaim his innocence.
This guy may be worth our time.
Let's go talk to him.
Morning. Y'all ready? Here's a copy of my resume. Everybody take one. The rules are nobody shows my face. Y'all agree to that? Come on in.
A Renaissance man knows how to get in front of a story.
He did this of his own accord, seemingly without any outside pressure, which really goes against the normal behavior of pretty much any person who's been accused of horrific crimes. In the show, it all plays out very dramatically, but that's actually how it went down. Williams was clearly convinced that he would walk away from the charges.
Did you kill those children, Wayne?
No, I did not.
Then why are you a suspect?
I got stopped by the FBI at the James Jackson Parkway Bridge. They asked me what I dropped in the river. I said, nothing. Ever since then, they've been following me.
For no reason.
Oh, they got their reasons.
Instead, he was sentenced to life in prison. Number 8. Ed Kemper's threats.
You came.
You made it hard not to.
Throughout season 1, Holden Ford develops a unique relationship with Ed Kemper. In the season finale, Holden learns that Kemper has attempted to take his own life. Ford visits Ed, but when the guards leave, Ed suddenly rises and explains to Holden how he could kill him.
I could kill you now pretty easily. Do some interesting things before anyone showed up.
Then, he gives him a hug, an act so utterly terrifying it mentally breaks the FBI agent. In reality, this exchange didn't occur between Kemper and Douglas, but between Kemper and Robert Ressler, who inspired the character Bill Tench. During one interview, the guards changed over, and Kemper detailed to a nervous Ressler all the things he could do to him if he wanted. Lucky for Ressler, there was no hug.
That is the truth.
Number 7. The evasive Dennis Lynn Rader. Agents Tench and Ford assist police forces across the country in a number of open investigations. Sprinkled throughout seasons 1 and 2, however, are short vignettes exploring the actions of a man who would evade police capture for decades, only being brought to justice in 2005. The mustachioed man in question is Kansas native Dennis Lynn Rader, also known as the BTK Killer, standing for Bind, Torture, Kill. As in the show, the BTK Killer was on the FBI's radar, but they had no way of identifying him until much later. The show sets him up as the ultimate organized killer, and based on how well he navigated law enforcement in real life, that's not inaccurate. Number 6. Son of Sam's Real Confession. David Berkowitz is one of the most infamous serial killers in U.S. history. When questioned about his motives after his arrest, he claimed to be a victim himself, not of violence, but of demonic influence.
I'm not some crazed sex killer. I needed a name that explained who I really was, that I was being controlled by a 3,000-year-old demon. People need to know demons are real. The Exorcist is based on actual shit.
You saw The Exorcist.
Everyone did.
More specifically, he claimed that his neighbor's dog Harvey was this demon in disguise, and that under its influence, he had no choice but to kill. When Tench and Ford go to interview Berkowitz in prison, he initially sticks to his story.
I knew it was wrong, but they made me do it.
But as Holden begins to peel back the layers of his narrative as it relates to his personal life and interests, and bring up financial interests, Berkowitz begins to crack. Finally, he admits the truth, just like he did to the real-life Agent Douglas.
They all bought it, David. Didn't they? Even the shrinks.
Especially the shrinks.
Number 5. Jerry Brudos' obsession with heels.
Just a healthy, red-blooded American male.
What about the shoes?
What shoes?
In your garage. The women's shoes.
Another of the criminals who Tench and Ford meet in Season 1 is Jerome Henry Jerry Brudos. He proves uncooperative at first, but having done his homework, Ford returns armed with a secret weapon, a large pair of women's shoes.
What's that?
A reward for honesty.
Brudos winds up using the shoes in a, let's call it, unique manner. Thankfully, there's no record of him having done that in real life, at least not with FBI agents present while in prison. But as for his obsession with women's clothing, shoes in particular, that is well documented. The nicknames he earned himself include the Lust Killer and the Shoe Fetish Slayer. In fact, he would often don high-heeled shoes after committing his crimes.
So when did it start? Your interest in women's shoes?
It didn't start. It was always there.
Number 4. It wasn't their night.
We'd like to have a conversation, Richard. Or what do you go by?
Immediately after showing Ford and Tench how truly uncaring he really is, Richard Speck looks the agent straight in the face and delivers the chillingly matter-of-fact reason for his crimes.
It just wasn't their night.
It's so brazen, over-the-top, and offensively dismissive that you might easily assume it's creative license. The crazy thing is, it is a direct quote from Speck, just not one that he delivered to the FBI. In 1996, an explicit video leaked of Speck consuming drugs and having a sexual encounter in prison in 1988. In the shocking footage, Speck is asked about his crimes, and as explanation, he offered the same line delivered by the actor playing him in the show. Number 3. The controversial Daryl Gene Devier interrogation.
You're the closest thing we have to an eyewitness.
Well, I took your polygraph. I'm an open book.
Thank you.
Despite the violent resistance encountered during their interview with Speck, Agent Ford feels that he's learned something invaluable. When you engage with a killer on their own level, they let their guard down and start talking. And so when they're called in to assist on an open case, he takes the approach he developed talking to convicted killers and applies it to suspected killers.
Definitely looks older than 12.
That's what I thought.
Okay. Thank you. So it's not just me.
Well, and these girls these days, they're developing so early.
They sure are.
Holden's approach is disturbing, at times downright sickening, but he ultimately gets results. Now, as many know, Holden is based on FBI agent John E. Douglas. The subject of Douglas's first murder suspect interrogation was indeed Daryl Gene Devier. Much of this interview, including the use of the rock, was taken from the real thing. Number 2. The Bird.
Is that a bird?
Where'd you get it?
Had a broken wing. Fed a meatloaf through an eyedropper.
Oh. Did you give it a name?
In Season 1, FBI agents Holden Ford and Bill Tench interview notorious mass murderer Richard Speck, who's been caring for a small bird he found. When Speck refuses to open up about his crimes, Ford goes off book and starts talking to the inmate, quote, in his own language.
Then why kill her?
'Cause I wanted to.
How'd you do her?
Choked her. Took forever.
Is that why you stabbed the others? It was faster.
That's right.
It works, for a time, but when Speck realizes he's being manipulated, he angrily ends the interview, hammering home his indifference by throwing the bird into a fan. It makes for a shocking TV moment, but perhaps more shocking is the fact that something similar really happened. When a guard told the real Speck he couldn't have a pet, Speck killed the bird in the same manner, saying that if he couldn't have the bird, no one could. Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. Number 1. The Crucifixion.
Dominion and power, now and forevermore.
The vast majority of the criminal cases explored in Mindhunter are rooted in reality. Thankfully, though, the story of Bill Tench's son Brian is fictional, created for the series.
You know, don't you, what they did to his little body? It was Brian's idea.
Bill is based on FBI agent and author Robert Ressler, whose own family was never involved in such an upsetting situation. However, the murder that Brian watches does mirror a real crime that took place in San Francisco in 1971 when 2 boys killed a toddler and tied him to a cross, hoping he'd come back to life. It was a crime that shocked the country, forcing the nation to have a difficult conversation about how to treat violent offenders who are children when they commit horrific crimes. Do you agree with our picks? Check out this other recent clip from WatchMojo, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.